everybody, and welcome back to CNC RC Adventures. Today we are looking at a new chassis for the SCX24. This is the FC1 chassis by TS.Fabs. Trevor over at TS.Fabs was nice enough to send me one to try out and see what I thought about it. This is a 3D printed chassis, and it's made for moving weight forward, low center of gravity, more of a performance-oriented chassis. We'll take a little closer look before I open it up. It comes with two rails. It comes with a tray that is to mount your receiver speed control on. It's got a cross brace for the back. It comes with new links, and those of you that are familiar with the SCX24 will notice that these are marked front, these are marked rear. The front ones are longer than the rear ones in this one. Usually, you know, on SCX24, it's the opposite. But the way that this chassis is set up, it's made to use these specific links. This is made to use on a C10 and Jeep style chassis, but he said it would probably work well on a deadbolt with some slight modifications. So I'm going to try it on this pretty much stock C10. It's stock, except it's got a new set of tires and wheel weights, but other than that, it's completely stock. So we'll get it out of the bag and see what it's all about. Okay, so here's all the parts out of the bag. The rails themselves come with several different shock mounting positions, which would be good. You know, we'll play around with that and see which ones work best. There's the rear ones. The links themselves, let me see if you can see it, are made so that you don't need to use pivot balls. Sorry, hang on, my camera to focus. I don't know much about 3D printing or how stuff is designed, but they're made to be used without pivot balls, so we'll see how that works. There's the tray, there's the center mount, the cross brace. Let's start taking this C10 apart, and we'll start putting this chassis set on it. So, okay, we have our body off. Went ahead and took the battery out. I'll point out my chassis set did not come with printed instructions because mine was one of the early sets, but Trevor has told me that all of the ones now do come with actual printed instructions. But just from looking at it, if you're familiar with an SCX24 and if you've done much modification and wrenching and stuff on them, it looks pretty straightforward. There are a few things that I'll point out as we go along that are kind of different, but shouldn't be anything that should be too challenging or too hard to do. So I'm going to go on and start by disassembling this one, and we'll just kind of speed through this. We're going to start off by just basically removing all the screws on each side that hold the chassis rail, the shocks, the electronics trays, all that kind of stuff in, and then we'll start putting everything back together. Okay, so I have disassembled this SCX24 and taken off the parts that we are not going to use. I'm not going to be using the stock chassis rails. We're not going to need these shock mounts. All the stock links and the little Y-link, we're not going to be using those. Battery tray we won't need. Electronics tray, we will be using the receiver and stuff, but the tray itself, we won't. We'll be probably using these body posts. But that's about all that's left of the stock SCX24. I see a lot of people on the message boards and social media and stuff talking about building one from scratch instead of just buying a kit. I think this chassis would be a good place to start with something like that if you were interested in something like that, because it comes with the rails, it comes with the links. There's really not a lot left to buy to build one. But anyways, so let's get started putting it back together. One of the things that you'll need to do is the drive shafts are not going to work in stock configuration. Right now, this is the front drive shaft, this is the rear drive shaft. But since we're switching the links around, the back ones are going to be shorter than the front. We're going to swap these two drive shafts. And there's just a little screw right there. Unscrew it, swap them over. Okay, so now we have the longer drive shaft on the front and the shorter one on the back. One other thing that I'll point out, when you're putting this together, you will need to trim this front drive shaft about 6 millimeters. So I'm going to do that real quick, and I'm going to do that off camera, and I'll be right back. Okay, so here's my shortened drive shaft. This is how much I cut off of it, not 6 millimeters. I measured it with my calipers. So now let's start putting things back together. We'll start with putting the links on. So these are the longer links, and these are the lower links. So they're going to be for the front. Okay, so we have our links on. I'm going to go on at this point and start putting the chassis rails on. So when you're looking at the chassis rails, you'll see they look almost the same, but one has this little hump. That's for the, where'd I put it? That's for the switch on the ESC. So this is the passenger side of the vehicle, and this is the driver's side. This little hump is on the passenger side. Okay, so there's both chassis rails put on. So now I'm going to go on, I guess, let's see, I'm going to go on and put the cross brace and the receiver tray in. Okay, so we have the cross brace and the receiver tray in. One thing I'll point out, or just kind of comment on, in the past I've had a few different 3D printed chassis from other manufacturers, and in putting them together and stuff, I noticed that the screw holes stripped very easily. This one I did not have that problem with at all. I don't know much about 3D printing. I don't know if it's material, if it's the way it's designed or whatever, but this went together nice and tight, no stripping, nothing to worry about as far as that goes. So I'm going to now get the other axles and links put on, and we'll be close to being done. Okay, so we have our links back on, our axles back on, everything put back together. I pointed out earlier that these links don't use pivot balls. So you want to be a little careful when you're putting the screws in. The top front ones that screw in here, and then on the back too. Right there. If you tighten them down too much, it kind of locks everything up and it won't pivot. But other than that, went together pretty easily. Again, you know, screwing into the 3D printed plastic was no concern. It worked just fine. Let's put some electronics in this and put some wheels back on it, and we'll see how it runs. Okay, so we have our electronics back in. The battery, so you can see it just slides in from one side, doesn't matter which side. This little split here allows the chassis to flex just a little bit so the battery can go in. It's just held in by friction, but it's not going anywhere. And you can see it puts more weight over the front end, which is always a good thing. So we'll get this put back together and we're gonna give it a test drive. I'm not gonna put the front bumper back on because I don't normally run bumpers, but there are holes there, so the bumper will go on if you decide you want to use a bumper. Okay, so now we've got everything together and running. Let's try it out. We're going to try it on the indoor course first, and then we'll take it outside. It's got plenty of clearance. Let me see if I can get the camera down. Sorry about that. We can see it. It's got plenty of clearance to get over obstacles, things like that. This is a tough spot on this course for a lot of vehicles just because it's such a steep step up right here. But so let's just see. I don't know if these small tires, if it'll make it or not. Okay, well, it made it no problem. So now I'm just going to turn it around. It is pretty forward weight biased. So, but it doesn't seem to really hurt it going down. Stays nice and composed, handles well. I mean, just this little bit of running I've done, I'm impressed with it. Let's see how it does outdoors.
Yeah. That's right.
So now that I have had time to test it outdoors, test it indoors, and spend some time with it, I'm ready to kind of give you my final thoughts on it. I have not tested every single chassis out there. There's so many of them, there's no way I could possibly test them all. I have tested quite a bit. I'm not going to mention names. I've tested this one, this one, this one, this one, stock chassis with just some carbon rails, and there, in my opinion, really isn't any comparison. This FC1 chassis, just in stock form like it is, you know, like I said, the only difference is it's got some different tires and wheel weights. It outperformed this chassis, which is kind of my main chassis, and this one is pretty heavily modified. It's got weight, tires, things like that. I could drive anything with this one that I could with the other one. So I'm super impressed with it. I think if you're looking to build a low CG competition style chassis, I think this is the way to go. I'm also going to do some more tweaking with it, add, do other modifications, do things like that. And maybe in a future video, we'll go back and revisit it and see what all I've done to make it even better. But just out of the box on just a stock setup, it makes a huge difference. So if you're looking for a chassis, this is the one to get. All right, everybody, thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.